Hi guys, this is Kimmy Yangs and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, it's been a long time since I've said hello to my fans and subscribers, and thank you so much for roughing it out with me all this time. And this video is kind of resurrecting my YouTube channel, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some very wholesome content your way in the upcoming months. I'll actually be starting a new series on my YouTube channel, something that has been simmering in my thoughts for quite some time now, and I thought it right to start this series today. This is actually going to be from the world of Formula One, where if you guys have been associated with me since the past few years would be aware that I also run a blog on Post Heaven, wherein I used to write a lot of F1 related content, race reports, season previews, season reviews, mid-season reviews, driver markets, and other stuff related to the world of the pinnacle of motorsport. Anyway, so this is something that I really wanted to do on my YouTube channel, more like talking to you guys and giving my assessment of how the season is panning out for the teams and drivers, and how things are stacking up for those who are contending for the championship and the benefits that come with it. So today I will actually be starting off with something from the real world racing domain, if I can put it that way. And today I'll actually be discussing about the 2022 Formula One season, the story so far. So if you have been a fan of Formula One, or if you have been watching a fair number of races, doesn't matter if you've been there since ages or you've just come on board thanks to the Drive to Survive series that Netflix has been running in collaboration with Formula One, you would be well aware of how the season has been panning out. We had a 23 race calendar that got cut down to 22 races, unfortunately due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We are praying and hope that peace would be restored as soon as possible, and the world would be able to get back up on its feet, especially after the pandemic, which is still raging on in quite a number of countries across the world. So yes, here we have a 22 race calendar in the 2022 Formula One season, and we are 9 races in, which is a shade less than halfway point in the season. And today I will be discussing about how the teams have been performing and what their prospects are for what remains of 2022. So without further much to say, and with the pleasantries out of the way, let's delve right into how the drivers and the teams have been performing. Well, first up, let's talk about Red Bull Racing F1 team, rather Oracle Red Bull Racing F1 team, because Oracle has come on board as their title sponsor. Max Verstappen was actually the champion from last year, although I know that there are a lot of fans who would still not be in agreement with this statement, but then it's already been declared and there's nothing more that can be done about it. So Verstappen, who is the reigning world champion, found performance in 2022 after the season opener in Bahrain, which was actually a shocking race for Red Bull, with a double DNF for both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. And to make matters worse, he also suffered a retirement in Australia. And when you look at the first 3 races, Max was way off the pace, and it seemed like his championship challenge was already faltering. Although yes, 22 races is a very long time, and but sometimes the tone gets set when you actually have a start like that. However, Max, with the talent that he has and the experience now that he has gained after a very intense championship fight with Hamilton last year, he was able to bring his resources to bear and make steps in the right direction. Thankfully, the reliability part of Red Bull also seemed to get addressed in his car, at least, and he actually went on a race winning spree. I actually have the stats open right here on my tablet, so I'll just go through this. So he retired in Bahrain, but he won in Saudi Arabia. beating Charles Leclerc, who was doing quite a fine job in that Ferrari. More on that later. And then, like I said before, he had his second retirement in Australia, but then he went on a race winning spree in which he won 5 out of the 6 races that followed. The only blip, if I can put it that way, was the 3rd place in Monaco, wherein which saw his teammate Sergio Perez come out on top. But everything said and done, Max actually recovered, reduced that deficit, and actually overturned it to take the lead in the championship. And as things stand, he's on 175 points, 46 points clear of his teammate in P2. So Verstappen actually has done a brilliant job so far, and considering the fact that he's not been able to get things right on a Saturday when it comes to one lap qualifying, getting that one lap in the qualifying, he's been far more mature and more complete in his performances come Sunday, and that kind of has translated into the results and the table standings as we see as of now. Now with Max P1, where does his teammate Sergio Perez stand? Well, Perez has had quite an interesting career in Formula 1. He actually made the big jump into McLaren, one of the top teams, way back in 2013 before he got bumped out of the team, and then he spent a lot of time with Force India. Eventually that became Racing Point, and then finally he did get the call up from Red Bull to partner Max Verstappen, who already was the de facto leader, if I can put it that way, in a team that has actually channelized its resources all towards giving Max a championship winning car. However, 2022 has been a very different situation compared to what it was last year for Sergio Perez. If you actually go to see, the 2021 car was more inclined towards, Max's driving style and how he was performing. But now with Sergio and his inputs coming in for the 2022 car, he's actually been able to get something that's brought a better balance to, and suits more his racing style as well. Considering that, Sergio has done a very fine job. In fact, the only 2 retirements he's had was again at the season opener in Bahrain, wherein Red Bull suffered a double DNF, and then unfortunately he suffered, I think, what was a hydraulic issue in the recently concluded Canadian Grand Prix. Other than that, he's been very consistent, been in the points. He's won 1 race, which was Monaco, the most prestigious race on the calendar, thanks to a strategic blunder by Ferrari. More on that later, something that we've gotten used to. But coming back to Sergio, and then he's had 4 second place finishes and a 4th place finish in Saudi Arabia as well. That's actually brought up his tally to 129 points. Like I said before, 46 points shy of his teammate in Max Verstappen in P1. Talking about Red Bull Racing as a team, well, there were concerns over the credibility and reliability of the Red Bull powertrain engines, as they've been termed for 2022, and considering the way Red Bull faltered in the initial rounds, especially with Max, it did seem that Red Bull wasn't bulletproof. They were fast, they had a brilliant car when it came into straight line speed, and with a guy like Adrian Newey at the helm, who is an aerodynamic guru, there was nothing to find fault in the latest Challenger that our Red Bull had produced. However, with the reliability issues that were still lingering on, it did seem that Red Bull might not really have that same kind of performance level that they had in 2021, but they have actually laid all those rumors to rest, and they lead the championship on 304 points. That is 76 points clear of the next best team, which is Ferrari in second. Also, interestingly, we have to remember that Red Bull is still using the facilities that Honda had to offer, and if you still have keen eyes, you can see Honda's logo somewhere around the engine bay of that Red Bull car. So Red Bull essentially still is running an engine that has a lot of input from Honda. Of course, it's been branded as Red Bull Racing, Red Bull Powertrain, just like how they were having Tag Heuer branded Renault engines when they were using the Renault powertrains back then. Anyways, that whatever said and done, Red Bull has done a brilliant job, and they seem to be favorites to lift the constructors' crown, something that they have been really pushing for quite some time now. Of course, it's not really been that dominating kind of season till now, but again, with Red Bull and the momentum that they're actually carrying, 3 1-2s this season, which is quite an interesting statistic to have with just 9 races in. They seem to be the favorites to lift the crown, and considering the fact that Max does have an edge over Sergio when it comes to the crunch situations and getting the job done, getting those results in when they are really needed, I still think Max would be the number one driver, contrary to all the claims that Red Bull and the Supremos at Red Bull might make. I still think Max would still remain the number one driver at that team. Talking about Scuderia Ferrari, well, the most successful team and the oldest team on the grid. It's been quite an interesting season because the Tifosi, the Ferrari faithful, have been waiting for those years of dominance to return. It's been 15 years since Ferrari last won the Drivers' Championship with Kimi Raikkonen way back in 2007. It's been 14 years since they've actually won a Constructors' title, which was last achieved in 2008. And every year the Tifosi have been hoping that this should be it. This is when we actually get things right as a team. Well, if I were to talk about this season so far, they just got off on the right note with a brilliant 1-2 in Bahrain. Charles Leclerc was able to have an answer for everything that Max Verstappen threw at him in terms of defense and car positioning and just using the battery pack, this huge ERS that Ferrari has built for its latest contender. And it did seem that Ferrari was right there, ready to fight for the championship at the end of the season opener. Well, after that, Charles did come second in Jeddah, and then he won the race in Australia, in which Max actually suffered a retirement, which actually sent him clear by about 40 points, if I remember correctly, which is quite a big margin compared to what it was for the others. But then Charles seemed to have hit a blip with a mistake that he did in Imola. I still remember he went wide and almost ended up hitting the barriers, but then he recovered and never really had the performance to pursue the other cars, and eventually finished in P6. And then he had a P2 in Miami before he actually suffered 2 retirements in the next 4 races, which has actually hurt him quite badly. One was in Spain, and then the other was in Baku. Well, if I were to talk about Charles Leclerc, he has been the better performing driver of the 2 drivers that Ferrari has currently. That's Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. But talking about Sainz after this, talking about Charles himself, he's been brilliant on a Saturday. He's gotten his he's gotten his lap times right, he's gotten his driving right, and he's actually bagged poles after poles. I think for so many pole positions that it would have been a no-brainer for anybody to put their money on Charles Leclerc come Sunday. But unfortunately, there are things that still plague Ferrari as a team, and one of the biggest problems is still their strategic calls, and that was something that really hurt Charles in Monaco, wherein he finished P4. And then what we thought was bulletproof wasn't really, and there were flaws that came out. There were chinks in the armor that began to show in that Ferrari, especially in Spain, which was a shocking retirement considering the fact that Charles was comfortably clear of the rest of the field. I think it was 13 or 14 seconds clear of Max there, and he was on the money, getting things right. Things were very different in Baku. He was actually chasing Sergio Perez, who was leading the race, and I was still not sure about the strategy that Ferrari had adopted, but then they had to go aggressive, they had to push, but then his engine gave way, and that was curtains on that race. Interestingly, now for Ferrari, they had to use the 4th unit on Charles's car, which brought him a penalty for Canada, sending him to the back of the grid, which then saw him charge right through and eventually finish P5. It remains to be seen how many more penalties Ferrari might require should they be pushing for a championship with Charles Leclerc, which I think now, considering the deficit that he has of 49 points to Max Verstappen, how easily it's going to be possible is something that I'm not really sure of. Also, I think with Ferrari is the performance of their second driver, that's Carlos Sainz. No disrespect meant, but there have been a fair share of mistakes by the Spaniard this season. He has not been able to really get things right in crunch situations when the team really needed him to be right up there with Charles, racing against both the Red Bulls. He's ended up somewhere in the middle and gotten into battles and entanglements that he was never supposed to be in the first place. But nevertheless, he's still P5 in the championship on 102 points. Of course, 73 points adrift of Max Verstappen. That's almost 3 race victories and 3 DNFs if he has to bridge that gap against Max, which seems to be quite unlikely. And I think that now Ferrari really needs to channelize their focus towards one driver rather than giving parity or equal treatment to both. Still, as I said, no disrespect meant to Carlos. He's had a fair share of problems himself. Australia, well, he had a mistake of his own when he ended up in the gravel on the opening lap. But then Imola and then Baku were 2 very painful retirements to suffer from for the Spaniard. Anyways, the season's long and there are still certain things that can be corrected for him. But yeah, in comparison to where Charles is in this season, I definitely thought Carlos would have been a lot closer than he is currently, considering the fact that he actually outscored Charles last year in the intra-team battle. So this is quite an interesting thing to see. Carlos is yet to win a race in his Formula 1 career. P2 has been the best that he's been able to achieve at 3 of the races, Bahrain, Monaco and then Canada. As for Charles, well, he's had 2 race victories, the season opener in Bahrain and Australia, and then he's got 2 P2s in Saudi Arabia and then Miami. So yes, there is a lot of racing left in the season and there will be more battles that will be coming our way, but let's see what Ferrari can bring up and what kind of upgrades can actually help them in bridging that gap to Red Bull. As of now, if I were to look at the constructor standings, well, they trail Red Bull by 76 points, which is again quite a big gap to bridge if you do not have both your drivers performing at the level you want them to perform. So yeah, that is how the situation is at Scuderia Ferrari F1 team. Talking about Mercedes AMG Petronas F1 team, well, they have been the undisputed kings of the turbo era, winning every constructors championship since the inception of this new era in 2014. And with a guy like Hamilton winning 6 championships out of the 8 that were on offer, it was a no-brainer to see Mercedes right up there fighting for the championship in 2022 as well. However, with the overall of technical regulations and the aerodynamic bits getting trimmed down to something that the FIA wanted to bring it down to, Mercedes suddenly seemed to be off the pace and suffering from balance and bouncing and porpoising issues. I still struggle pronouncing that, but yeah, it's been a baptism by fire for Mercedes in this new chapter of the turbo era in the Formula 1 world. And surprisingly, despite all the challenges that they are currently facing and the flack that people like Toto Wolff have been receiving due to the lack of performance from their latest challenger, the team still sits third in the championship on 188 points. Of course, they are well off the lead against Red Bull. They trail by about 116 points. Wow, that's quite a lot, considering that we are 9 races in already. On the personnel side, though, they've had a personnel change where we saw Valtteri Bottas leave the team for Alfa Romeo, and we had Mr. George Russell, or Mr. Saturday, get promoted into Mercedes finally, and I'm sure he would have been dreaming about winning races and being in the reckoning when it comes to the Drivers' Championship, considering that he himself has been so flawless when it came to the feeder series and winning championships there. He's actually got the better of his far more experienced and far more successful teammate in Lewis Hamilton, or rather, correct me, apologize for that, Sir Lewis Hamilton. George has actually been quite consistent. He's racked up 3 podium finishes. He's got 3 P3s in Australia, in Spain, and then of course in Baku. And he's actually been in the points. So if I were to just read out his finishing positions, he's been P4, P5, P3, P4, P5, P3, P5, P3, P4. That's how consistent he's been. So whenever any of the top 4 drivers or the drivers from the top 2 teams have slipped up or had some sort of issue on their car, the man who's actually stepped up to the plate and taken maximum advantage out of that has been George Russell till now, and that has of course translated to where he stands in the standings. He's currently P4 on 111 points, 64 points shy of Max Verstappen there. So, well, I must say I'm very impressed with Russell and his performances so far, considering the fact that this Mercedes has been more than a handful when it comes to driving it, and Russell, with his height disadvantage, obviously would not be too comfortable sitting in a car that's just been porpoising all the time. So, but yeah, that is how things are, and you have to find workarounds, challenges and situations, and Mr. Saturday has now translated his performances into a consistent Mr. Sunday level performance. So yeah, good outings by George Russell so far, and hopefully he should be able to continue his rich vein of form into the remaining rounds of this championship. As for Sir Lewis Hamilton, who has won 7 championships, as many as the great Michael Schumacher in his career, and is still and is actually the most successful driver in the history of Formula 1, sits P6 in the championship. He's got 2 P3 finishes. One was at the season opener in Bahrain, which he practically inherited from the 2 DNFs that the Red Bull car suffered, and the recently concluded Canadian Grand Prix, where he finished P3 as well. Other than that, he had a very disappointing outing in Imola, where he finished P13, and Toto actually apologized to him on the radio for giving him a really tough car to drive. Monaco was P8, not really the best showing for him, and P4 in Baku was quite a straining performance for him, because it actually messed up his back pretty badly, all the bouncing that this car was having on the straights, and it's not really been smooth sailing for this multi-world champion in 2022. He's currently placed P6 in the standings on 77 points, 98 points shy of Max Verstappen, his title challenger last year, and I'm sure he would be hoping for better days coming ahead. Well, credit where credit's due. While Red Bull and Ferrari have had their fair share of unreliability and performance issues, both the Mercedes cars have been reliable. They might not have the same level of performance and the straight line speed that they are hoping to achieve, but in terms of completing races, putting on those hard-earned laps, which will bring in more data and help them improve even more into the upcoming races. I'm sure Mercedes has been doing a good job there, and kudos to them for being reliable at least, because that's very important. And to finish first you have to finish. So this is the mantra that Mercedes should be following going forward as well, and they still remain the third best team on the grid, the best of the rest, and wishing them all the best in the upcoming races of 2022. Talking about McLaren F1 team, powered by Mercedes powertrains, or McLaren Mercedes, like they used to be famously called in the days of Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard, the years that I actually started following Formula 1. Well, they have been the fourth best team, and unfortunately in the 9 races they only have one podium finish, that's P3, to Lando Norris in Imola, and that's actually been quite tough for McLaren as a team, because they've had such a strong end to 2021. They were very good in terms of the level of performance. It was P4 that they finished in the constructors in 2021, and they would have hoped to move from strength to strength in 2022. Unfortunately, that's not been the case, and both Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo have had their fair share of problems and struggles, not to mention the lack of Mercedes power down the straights has not helped matters either. So, but yes, whatever said and done, things as they stand. See, McLaren placed 4th on 65 points. That's quite a fair shot off from Red Bull, and they are actually in a very intense battle with Alpine and Alfa Romeo of Orlen F1 team, which is quite interesting to see, and a DNF here or there, or a couple of poor races, and we could see the pecking order change very quickly in this really tight midfield, similar to what we had seen last year as well. Talking about the drivers, well, they retained both their drivers in Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo for 2022, and Lando has actually been the better performing of the two drivers. He's currently P7 in the standings with 50 points to his name, while Daniel Ricciardo is P13, which is quite disappointing to see, considering the caliber that the Australian has and the history of performances that he has had in the past. And he's racked up only 15 points, level with Kevin, although he's placed lower because of a poorer best finish to Kevin, who's actually had a P5, and Daniel's best finish has been P6 in his home race in Australia. So that said, well, it's tough times for Daniel, and with just 2 points finishes in 9 races, that is really not something that you would expect from the Honey Badger. Well, for Norris, it's been more consistent, if I can put it that way. He's had two finishes out of the points. He's had one retirement, which was in Miami, and other than that, he has ended up in the top 10 more often than not. Well, for McLaren, I think going forward, it's still going to be quite difficult, but they do have the technical know-how, they do have the team and the personnel capable enough of finding faster solutions and hopefully turning around a season which has been quite difficult so far for them. Next up, we've got the BWT Alpine F1 team, and well, it's been quite an interesting journey so far for the people from Enston in UK, and Alpine currently sits P5 in the standings, 8 points shy of McLaren with 57 points to their tally. On the personnel side, well, they have retained the services of Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso, and both are actually in a quite interesting battle. They are placed P9 and P10 in the standings, although Fernando hasn't had the best of fortune compared to Ocon when it comes to reliability. In fact, he even went on to say that probably his car has more issues, or he suffers from more issues than Ocon does in 2022, which is controversy stirring for many fans. Anyways, like I said, Esteban currently leads the intra-team battle with 39 points to his name, more than double than what Alonso has amassed so far. And Esteban's best finish has been P6 in Canada, the recently concluded Grand Prix. He's had another P6, in Saudi Arabia, and then he's had points finishes in all the races bar 2 races that were in Imola and Monaco. So Esteban has been quite consistent that way. As for Fernando, well, he's had 4 finishes out of the points, 2 of which have been in retirements, and his best finish so far has been P7 in Monaco and Azerbaijan in Baku. Well, for Alpine though, if I were to talk about this team, it's been quite a trying time for them as well, because as a full works team, you don't really want to see them faltering or being so adrift from the other constructors and factory teams of Formula 1. There was hope that Alpine would actually find performance and make giant strides or gains in the years to come, but they've actually kind of hit a plateau in which they're not really able to break off from this really tight midfield, and they're really struggling in terms of getting consistent results out of their car. In straight line, that Alpine is absolutely a beast. It's so fast that it's kind of shocking to see a car so quick. But yes, it's not been easy sailing for Alpine, and hopefully we should be able to see some sort of performance improvement from them, hopefully with upgrades coming from Silverstone, which is actually their home race going into this weekend. So this brings me to the end of part 1 of the review, and I've actually covered the top half of the field, the top 5 teams, and now in part 2 I'll be actually looking at the lower half, or the bottom 5 teams, and this is just to break it into 2 parts, what would be otherwise a very long video, and I'm sure you guys would not have that kind of an attention span. So yes, this is the end of part 1, and now I'm going to actually be leaving the link so that you guys can go and have a look into part 2 of the story so far in the 2022 Formula 1 season. See you guys in part 2.